So, hello everyone from the dystopian capitalist monarchy of the United Kingdom. Now, you guys all know, when I left my travels around Southeast Asia, I actually left the country the day the Queen died. Like, I was on my flight to Doha, knowing she was really ill, and then I got to Doha and she'd been dead for a couple hours. So I actually missed the absolute insanity that became the UK, where people just lost all sense of reason. People were just doing the craziest stuff, whether that was crying at the gates of Buckingham Palace for like a 97-year-old billionaire who wouldn't piss on them if they're on fire, loads of people just like absolutely losing their mind, local councils locking up bike racks. Apparently you couldn't lock your bike up because the Queen had died. Like, the country just descended into madness. The whole thing was extremely embarrassing, but it was also insanely funny. I don't really identify with my English upbringing. I hate the monarchy. I have like an Irish Republican background, so that's what I care about. And honestly, the whole thing was just funny. I found the whole thing funny, from how people were acting, how BBC essentially turned into complete state propaganda. And then you have the more dystopian elements of people actually being arrested for protesting the monarchy, people even being threatened with arrest for holding up blank pieces of paper. People have this image of North Korea, but in many ways, Britain was fitting that image when the Queen died. But don't worry, the country has lost its mind again, and that is for the coronation of King Charles III. But basically, if you guys don't know and you're American, Charles is the king. Like, you guys might be saying, what even is all this? Charles is actually the king. This is just some super expensive, pointless ceremony which actually makes him the king, and it has all this religious stuff as well, because if you guys don't know, you're not from the UK, Charles is also the head of a religion, the Church of England. If you want to learn about that, type in Henry VIII, Henry VIII's divorce. The best way to describe it is basically Catholicism without the Pope, and instead of the Pope, the King of England is the head of their religion, and also they have these archbishops who sit in the House of Lords, the unelected chamber in British politics. Now, to set the scene, Queen Elizabeth was quite well liked in the UK. Like, I personally thought she was a pretty terrible person. It can be based on, like, historically not abdicating while all these terrible things were done in her name, especially to the British colonies, but also because one of her last acts was paying millions to Prince Andrew's legal fees. But anyway, most people liked her. People were genuinely upset for some reason that she died and not recognizing how funny the whole situation was. But Charles is not well liked. And of course, Americans will know this because your press loves the royal family. Charles is not well liked because of the whole divorce of Diana and how the royal family treated Diana's death. I just think a lot of people don't really care about him. They either think he's pretty weird, out of touch, and he's just like an unelected billionaire monarch. I don't feel like there's any passion behind him, and I would love him to be the last monarch of the UK. But don't worry, despite the fact that Charles isn't as popular, so there isn't actually really any reason to the hysteria he's creating, Britain has once again lost its mind. It's embarrassing again, and I just don't understand how any of these things make sense. And everyone roasting the whole UK on Twitter, it is well deserved. And on a more serious note, I think a lot of the problems of our country can be explained by how the whole like elite react to this, how the whole press react to it, how most people react to like coronations, jubilees, or deaths of monarch in this country. I think says a lot about the British mentality of being subservient and just accepting this status quo, which fundamentally makes no sense. Are people really telling me historically it makes sense that a family who believe they are chosen by God to rule over us should rule over us, or even in the present day where they don't have as much political power, that a family believe they're chosen by God, so they should get so many special privileges, tax exemptions, they should own loads of land in this country as well, unchallenged? Like, you think that makes sense as well? But on that note, thankfully, the taxpayer are actually footing the bill for this pointless coronation. So, CNBC reporting, the expense of the weekend's proceedings, which include a king's procession, a star-studded concert in Windsor Gardens, are expected to run between £50 million and £100 million, according to estimates by the BBC. And who pays for the event? The occasion, like most public events, is funded by the UK government and ultimately the British taxpayer, with Buckingham Palace also contributing an undisclosed share, Be nice to know that. This has disgruntled some Brits, with 51% saying the coronation should not be funded by the government, according to a recent poll, while 18% were undecided. So like many places in the world, the UK is going through a crazy economic crisis where prices of everything are just skyrocketing, while our government does nothing, because most of them are the elite, they're landlords, they're big business owners and stuff like that, so they benefit from this. At the same time, 51% of us say, we don't want to pay for this, but we still have to pay for this. It's an absolute joke that any taxpayer money should go towards them. Like, even if you think we should have a monarchy for some reason, you can see how ridiculous it is that your taxes fund some of the wealthiest people in this country to basically play dress up like they're in some sort of Disney fairy tale. Now, before we go into some of the ridiculous headlines coming out of the UK, including being urged to pledge allegiance to our new king, I just thought we'd talk about Charles himself. You guys ever wondered how rich Charles actually is, in that he could probably pay for his coronation about 10 times over, and probably still have some money left over as well. So Forbes wrote an article, it's really long, detailing where like all his wealth comes from. I'm just going to read a couple to make you aware of how wealthy this guy actually is. So it talks about everything he inherited from the Queen, like jewellery, art, rare stamps, and Forbes valued these personal assets at $500 million, and Charles won't have to pay any inheritance tax thanks to a 1993 agreement with the government. The 73-year-old monarch also accedes the throne with a king's ransom of his own, largely through the lucrative annual income he received from the Duchy of Cornwall, which earned him some $27 million this year, which his eldest son William will also inherit. As the new monarch, Charles assumes ownership of institutions that manage an estimated $46 billion in assets. This includes the Crown Estate, a sprawling real estate portfolio with $20.7 billion in net assets, talking about all their apartments and palaces and gardens and stuff around the country. In his 64 years as the Prince of Wales, Charles also learned how to build his outrageous fortune. He largely depended on income from the Duchy of Cornwall, which expanded under his tenure to $1.3 billion in net assets, including some $433 million in commercial properties. So not only do British citizens have to fund the royal family as part of the government providing for them, these guys also have crazy tax privileges, own so much land, inherit loads of stuff from their family members, which they don't pay inheritance tax on either. And while they're getting all that, they actually pursue even more wealth and make themselves even more wealthy. But when it comes to funerals, when it comes to coronations, well, they don't like to tell anyone how much they pay, because they probably don't pay for most of it. They're not paying for the logistics, they're not paying for the army, they're not paying for the police presence there, they're not paying for anything. I'm guessing the amount they're paying is probably very, very minimal. But that is how cucked we are in the UK. We are still paying for a guy who's so wealthy, probably one of the wealthiest people in the UK, has power and influence that we can only dream of, and us peasants, we're still funding that? Why? And the whole media apparatus, the whole elite in this country just gaslights everyone into thinking this is normal, into thinking this is okay. And I'm really happy younger generations are starting to see what a sham this is. But I'm going to show you throughout this video that a lot of people still love the royal family, but notice how none of them are actually younger than like 50 years old. Now let's get into the absolutely ridiculous shit that's been going on in the last couple of weeks in this country and how we're just a total global embarrassment. So this one was doing the rounds. This made me laugh. So Coronation will include invite to the public to swear allegiance out loud to King Charles. Like, are we Knights of the Round Table in like 500 AD or something? Like, what even is this? So millions of people will be asked to say a pledge of allegiance to the king when he is crowned on Saturday. For the first time in history, the public will be given an active role in the coronation, with the Archbishop of Canterbury calling on those watching or listening to the event to take part in a great cry around the nation and around the world of support for the king. During the service, the Most Reverend Justin Welby will ask all persons of goodwill in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and of the other realms and territories to make their homage in heart and voice to their undoubted king, defender of all. What even is this? Like, how backwards is this? And they actually think they can tell people not just in England, people in Scotland, where most people don't want the monarchy, people in Northern Ireland, where half of them don't want the monarchy, and I'm guessing he's referencing the colonies now as well, where loads of them are trying to actively get rid of the monarchy. So he's saying we should all pledge allegiance to the king, defender of all. Is he defender of the poor, or is he defender of the elite? So the order of the service will read, all who so desire in the abbey and elsewhere say together, so here's the pledge, I swear I will pay true allegiance to your majesty and to your heirs and successors according to the law, so help me God. There will then be fanfare, after which Mr. Welby will say, God save the king, and will ask all to respond, God save King Charles, long live King Charles, may the king live forever. A spokesperson for Lambeth Palace said, the homage of the people is particularly exciting, because that's brand new. That's something we can share in because of technological advances. So not just the people in the Abbey, but people who are online on television who are listening and who are gathered in parks at big screens and churches. Our hope is that at a point when the Archbishop invites people to join in, that people wherever they are, if they're watching at home, on their own, watching the telly, will say out loud the sense of a great cry around the nation and around the world in support for the king. So what do you guys think of that? Do you think the monarchy is in touch? Does it remind you of like how out of touch monarchies around Europe have been that have been ended, like the French monarchy or the Russian monarchy? The Russian monarchy, who are directly related to Charles and were ended by these guys. How can you argue for this institution to exist? King Charles is head of the church, and the guy second in command of the church, Archbishop of Canterbury, is telling people to pledge allegiance to this king. Pledge allegiance to this figure. I don't even understand the Church of England. How does this not go against, like, God? God was real. Do you think he would be like, oh, I like the Windsors so much. I like them. They got to rule over the UK. And actually, everyone in the UK, all you Christians, just everyone, pledge allegiance to Charles. I, God, have personally chose him to rule over you. So, yeah, do what the Archbishop says. Pledge your allegiance to this man. If I was some sort of devout Christian, I'd be offended. Isn't the only king meant to be like God and Jesus? Now, thankfully, I don't actually know anyone in real life who would ever pledge allegiance to Charles. And even my mum, who is a fair bit older, she was talking about how stupid it is. And my grandma absolutely like hates the royal family. She is Irish, so you come to expect that. But do you guys think people actually say this? Who in England will pledge their allegiance to Charles? An article in the Daily Echo. Will Southampton residents swear allegiance to King Charles? Southampton is a city in the south of the UK. I actually went to university there. The Southern Daily Echo took to the streets to ask the people of Southampton their opinions on the King's coronation and the public pledge of allegiance. John Sykes, 62, said, I'm happy to take part in the Pledge of Allegiance. People are entitled to their own opinions, but I'm for the monarchy. Very much so. Colin McShannon, MBE, and Madeline McShannon, 73 and 70, who are retired from Perth, Scotland, also favour pleading their allegiance. Madeline said, we are going on a cruise ship, so we will be pledging our allegiance to the king there. We have always liked the royal family. We are right royalists. We haven't got anything special planned because we'll be on a cruise, but hopefully they'll put something on for us. So the rest of the article just interviews a bunch of like younger people who aren't in their like 60s and 70s, who all say it's stupid, it's ridiculous, and even people who support the monarchy are saying like, this is just too much. Like, we shouldn't be pledging allegiance to the monarchy, this individual. It's not even the nation. It's not even like the Pledge of Allegiance in America, which is really dystopian and weird anyway. You're literally pledging allegiance to a singular figure, the unelected billionaire head of state in the UK, who believes himself to be chosen by God to rule over everyone. So that's who we should be pledging allegiance to. But anyway, there's even more stuff, because I've said before, we're all forced to care about it. We act like it's like the default state of humanity in the UK, like there has to be a royal family. As a kid growing up, I remember like jubilees, celebrations, deaths of royals and stuff, and I didn't really understand what was going on. Like, you kind of understand like something important's happening, maybe you get a day off school, maybe there's a celebration in school, but you don't really understand it, right? So this is really dystopian, and I wonder who actually organised this. So this was a couple of weeks ago. Children drown out protesters by chanting, "He's our king," during Charles' visit. Now, I'll try and play you a video of this, but I think it was on TV, so I'm not sure about copyright, so I'll just read it to you. A group of school children drowned out anti-monarchy protesters with chants of, "He's our king," as Charles visited Liverpool. The King and Queen concert were welcomed to the city's central library by a mixed crowd. Demonstrators shouted, "He's not our king," and "Feed the poor," and they gathered opposite, while a crowd of royal fans lined up to cheer the couple on. The latter group included school children who waved Union Jack flags as the monarch's car arrived. The clip shows anti-monarchy chants being drowned out by school children shouting, "He's our king." I don't need to tell you that young school children aren't really engaged in the debate about if there should be a monarchy or if Britain should be a republic, right? They certainly don't know to chant things like, "He's our king," in response to anti-monarchy protests, right? And also, this is in Liverpool. Liverpool is one of the most left-wing places in the whole of the UK, traditionally hates the royal family as well. So you're telling me a bunch of school kids in unison, spontaneously in Liverpool, started chanting, "He's our king," in response to anti-monarchy sentiment and protest? Obviously someone organised this, and that's how dystopian this country often becomes, is that kids get turned into political props. There was another thing recently where they're trying to make kids sing about Britain being a great nation or something, even in like Northern Ireland and Scotland, in places that want to like break away from the UK, even in like Catholic communities of Northern Ireland, they wanted them to sing about Britain being a great nation. Like, we've had this sentiment rising for a long time. I actually get depressed how much of American political culture starts seeping into the UK. But yes, clearly, children don't act like that. Children certainly don't act like that in a massive group either. All coordinated, chanting, "He's our king, he's our king." Between the ages of 5 and let's say 12, would you have done that? No, you wouldn't have. And also, as someone who's raised in this country, you're taught to be like a bit more reserved. You're not taught to stand out. You're not taught to start chanting stuff, especially in front of like the royal family. Everyone would tell you to be on your best behavior for that. Definitely wouldn't start chanting about him being your king. You've been told to do that. Someone has organized that, and it's honestly pretty gross. So moving on to more useless shit that no one wanted, and being forced to care about the royal family, King Charles portraits schools, councils, and police stations to receive pictures, at the cost of £8 million to the taxpayer. Oliver Dowden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, said the pictures would serve as a visible reminder to buildings up and down the country of the nation's ultimate public servant. They will help us turn a page in our history together and pay a fitting tribute to our new sovereign. I'm sure they will take pride of place in public buildings across the land. 8 million for pictures? 8 million? Like, we all have to see this guy everywhere like it's the 1920s or something? But like, more shit that gets normalised. King reminds railway passengers to mind the gap. The King has recorded an announcement for railway stations across the UK in which he reminds us to mind the gap. The recording, made at Highgrove earlier this year by TfL, can also be heard on the London Underground until Monday. My wife and I wish you and your families a wonderful coronation weekend, which you're paying for, by the way. Whenever you're travelling, we hope you have a safe and pleasant journey. Why am I hearing them? Why am I hearing them on the train? I don't agree with them. I don't want them to wish me a happy coronation weekend. It's not my coronation. It should be when I hit 100k subscribers. I should be coronated the King of RedTube UK, but the taxpayers aren't going to fund that. So Charles, thanks for the message, but I would much rather if you fund your own coronation and just go away, to be honest. I don't want to hear your voice. I doubt the minimum wage workers on 5 hours sleep in the London Underground at 6 AM want to hear your voice, and while you talk about minding the gap. What gap are you talking about? The gap between the train and the platform, or the insane wealth gap between you, a multi-billionaire maybe, and the rest of us just scraping by during a cost of living crisis? So I'm well aware a lot of people watching this video won't be from the UK, and you're listening to me rant. You know I hate the monarchy. Most people my age either hate the monarchy or don't care about it. Honestly, if you're under 40 and actually like the monarchy, you're just a complete weirdo. But who are the people that support the monarchy? Who are these people who love the monarchy? Who are the people who will be there for the coronation and will take the Pledge of Allegiance? Now, I don't usually read this absolute dumpster fire of a website, but the Daily Mail sometimes is good for one thing, in that they massively pad out their articles for SEO reasons. And they've done an article about the army of eccentric royal campers who are enjoying the festival atmosphere as they raise a toast to the king with a well-earned drink, as superfans continue flocking to the capital with coronation fever gripping the UK. So what this article does well is highlight the type of people who support the monarchy in the UK. People who are like super fans of the monarchy. So let's get into some of this. It's very maddening that people even feel this way. So patriotic campers swathed in Union flags and stocked up with tinned all-day breakfast, booze and bunting are settled in for Saturday, many of whom also camped out for the Queen's funeral. One couple jetted in from New Zealand for a trip that will cost them 5k and camped near a group of women nicknamed the Golden Girls, who met for the first time at the Platinum Jubilee last year and agreed to reunite in the same spot for the coronation. Many are sleeping in tents. One man has had 2 stolen already. 2 tents you brought? But some are just sleeping on the floor. With rain and thunder forecast in the coming days, many are likely to get very wet, but vowed not to let Britain's spring weather dampen their spirits. Faith Nicholson, 61, gonna be a trend you guys will see, these people are all old, has been attending royal events for more than 40 years. She said, "I've been doing these now since 1981, and the crowds just get bigger and bigger and bigger at each event. Come Saturday, this is going to be packed. We all look out for each other, we all watch each other's tents, people bring us food, it's just really nice." She added that she feels she probably has let the Queen down a bit by only camping on the Mall for 4 nights ahead of her funeral in September. Not everyone in her family are as staunch supporters of the monarchy, but Mrs. Nicholson doesn't let that stop her. "My husband thinks I'm mad. My son, who is a policeman, I think he's embarrassed." Now, I will say I find your royal simping quite embarrassing, but I think your son should be more embarrassed for, being a policeman. What you're doing by comparison, not embarrassing at all. I wish all policemen would hand in their badges and just start camping out for coronations and funerals instead. Kathy Shepherd told the Mail Online, "I came in for the funeral, and when I saw the haggard looks of Anne and Charles, I just thought you have done such a sterling job, and your hearts are breaking, and I'm going to come to the coronation to support you." So I almost admire the dedication of some of these people. This is one of the younger people, and I honestly can't really believe this, to be honest. So Bartley Graham, 34, arrived at the Mall on Wednesday after discharging himself from hospital. He has joined dozens of people gathered in front of the palace ahead of the King's coronation. He said, "I should have been here earlier, but the hospital scenario made it impossible. I self-discharged this morning purely so I could be here. It's important I'm here to get a good view of the procession, as I did for the Jubilee. I came out for Prince Philip's funeral. Even though there was a risk I might be fined at the time, I queued for 30 hours at Balmoral to see the Queen's coffin. I queued 30 hours a second time at the Houses of Parliament. Then I passed out, had a stroke, and all I could blame was exhaustion. If it happens again, I'm in the right place. London's hospitals are the best in the country. I love being out here." Mr. Graham came wearing a suit printed with Union Jacks and carrying a cardboard cutout of Charles, who he thinks will be a fantastic king. "I like Charles, and I definitely like Camilla. Charles will be a fantastic king and will do a great job. He has some really strong values, and I think Lady Camilla has fallen into the role very well." Kerry Evans, 58, said he would rather die than miss the King's coronation. Well, that guy actually did nearly die from going to the other royal events. "Every time I come out to an event like this, I end up in casualty because I just exhaust myself. But I really paced myself this time. Nothing would stop me. I would rather die supporting the royal family than not be a part of this. I'll probably suffer for 3 or 4 months after an event like this." Those last 2 people have dedication, which is like out of the 1500s or something. Like, how can you do that? How has this country brainwashed these people so bad that they're literally risking their physical health to go and camp out in these conditions and saying, like, it's going to impact me for 4 or 5 months after I end up in casualty, and I'm glad I'm in London because it has the best hospitals, and then I would rather die being here than not be here. Like, I'm just absolutely amazed by that. Of course, I read this article in my head before I made this video, but reading it out loud, it's just so insane. Like, I can't understand how these people are prioritizing the royal family over their own health. And it's actually just really sad to me. I obviously can speculate on what kind of hole is being filled by them worshipping this royal family in their own lives, because it doesn't seem like normal behavior at all. But even though I think it's not normal behavior to worship this insanely rich family who literally do not care about any of these people, they wouldn't help any of these people with anything, it's another level if you are going out of your way to camp on the streets of London, being like old as well, some of these people, and potentially thinking you might die doing that. You might die of exhaustion. That guy was 34. He said he had a stroke from exhaustion of queuing for 30 hours 2 times in like 2 weeks or something. Like, how insane are these people? And I'm not going to completely blame like everything in society, but there is a super unhealthy culture in Britain that makes people think they have to care about this. Now, thankfully, when we've been reading these articles and people have been expressing pro-monarchy sentiment, they are like in their 60s or 70s even, or even 80s. So I'm hoping as the generations pass on, less people feel like that. And I'm hoping this 30-year-old guy who's risking his life doing this, I'm hoping that is a tiny minority, because in my own experience, I am only 27, don't know many 34-year-olds, I feel like most people wouldn't even dream of this. And there's so much in that most people my age, regardless of political affiliation, they would not dream of this. So I'm hoping this embarrassing moment, as it is embarrassing for everyone who lives here, of people losing their minds and risking their own lives, they've said, camping out to get a glimpse of the billionaire king, I'm hoping this is like an end to all that. Like, people now are kind of sick of it. The Queen's died, so lots of the goodwill towards the monarchy has gone. But still, you see in the UK how we are kind of forced to care. London Underground announcers, £8 million being spent on portraits of Charles, being asked to pledge our allegiance to the king. The BBC, our lovely impartial broadcaster, basically never featuring any anti-monarchist sentiment, and then children being organised to counter anti-monarchy protesters. People like this caricature of North Korea, but we fit very nicely into that in many ways. Britain is just totally embarrassing, but the only nice thing about all this is when the Queen died, I just hated how the whole country just pretended they cared, pretended they were upset. People being like, oh, I'm no monarchist, but I'll miss her, or she was a great public servant. At least now we get none of that. If you're under 40, you hate Charles. If you're under 40, you don't care about Charles. If you're under 40, you are not pledging allegiance, and you're not acting like you care about the monarchy. But anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.